amazing message, because I know it's amazing, because it's always amazing when Tim is teaching. I cannot wait to hear what he has. I actually don't know what he has today. Oh, as I look in my friend's notes here, it's living by love. Oh, that is so the topic of the hour today. My message a few weeks ago, I just feel really passionate about God showing us different aspects of love. So I'm really anxious to see what Tim has to share today. Go ahead, Tim.
I hit the button. Good morning. I'm anxious to hear what I'm going to say too. That'd be great. That'd be great. Good to see you guys. And that was really corny. Seal the deal. Porpoise. Yeah. Living by love. About a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. I was, sitting in my bed, as I always do in the morning, with my cup of coffee, my wonderful cup of coffee, in the presence of Jesus. And I wrote down like 3 lines, and I was like, well, that wasn't the track I was on for anything. I was like, oh, okay, that feels very much like something I should talk about, and kind of like wrote it down. Pat went on to my other stuff. But so living by love, it's one of those things that Jesus. Living by love is one of the most amazing things we could possibly do. And I think probably one of the hardest things that we can possibly do. So let me just start out with 1 Corinthians 13:13. Which, a lot of us know 1 Corinthians 13, but that last verse in the chapter says, and I'm going to be in the New King James, if that helps anybody. And now abide faith, hope, and love, these 3, but the greatest is love. And the way I perceive that is, for now and throughout all eternity, these 3 will abide. There will always be faith, there will always be hope, and there will always be love. I don't think they will ever pass away. But the greatest is love, a message that's been talked about forever, and I'm sure we have all heard love talked about. But Lynn, I took a class from Jonathan Welton some time ago, and he actually had a tendency to describe heaven's atmosphere as love. Literally the air of heaven that is breathed continuously is love. It's like you breathe in love, you breathe out love, you breathe in love, you breathe out love. It's this continual fulfillment of love. And he described it as, we need to be constantly connected to heaven. Almost like a diver, a deep diver, where they have the hose coming down to them. If you remember seeing pictures of that, and they're constantly fed the air from above in order for them to survive under the ocean. And so we need to be constantly connected to heaven in order to be breathing in that love and breathing out that love. And it's funny, I was thinking about the atmosphere of heaven this morning a little bit, and I was remembering something I'd heard a long time ago, and I'm a little science geeky kind of thing, but they say if they were to find somebody's bones or an animal's bones, and they want to know how old those bones were, they would actually look at them, and they could tell, by the radiation in the bone, how old it was, because radiation decays. Scientifically, it's like a half-life, like if there's 100% while they're alive, then, 1,000 years later, it might be 25% and so on, or half of that, and then half of that. So by measuring that radiation in the bones, they can say, oh, this person lived 20,000 years ago, whatever the case may be. But the way that radiation gets in those bones is every time we breathe in, there is radioactive material in the air. It comes in, it becomes part of our body. It becomes part of our bones. And that as long as we're alive, as long as we're breathing, there is a constant level of radiation in us. This is just the way things are. But when we stop breathing, that radiation starts decaying. And so that way they can track how old those bones are. And, I think in kind of my mind, strange mind that I have, is like, as long as we're breathing heaven's air, we're constantly keeping a level of love in us. If somebody stops following Jesus, stops loving Jesus, stops breathing in love, that love level will start decaying within them. So it'll be a decrease of love, a decrease of love. Now, Jesus' grace, mercy, they can always start breathing again and fill themselves back up with love. But it's like so important to stay focused on love, stay breathing the atmosphere of heaven. So anyway, I was kind of thinking about that. And I gave scriptures to Andrew. So of course I have to throw a curveball at him. We're going to actually talk a little bit about the entire 1 Corinthians 13, a really short little thing. Because we all know the chapter of love, right? It starts, let's see, without love, we're just a banging cymbal, a gong. I was picturing this morning of a toddler hitting a skillet with a wooden spoon. How annoying that is if you've ever had a toddler banging on a pan. It's like, oh, they're having fun, but oh my gosh, that's annoying. So, if we're living our life without love, it's like the toddler going wang, 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 and stop, please. Oh, find something else to do quietly. We need to always be moving in love. So and in verse 4 continues, it says, love suffers long, is kind, love does not envy, love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up, it does not behave rudely, it does not seek its own, it is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I went Southern for a second. Things. Love never fails. And the interesting thing about little story. When Lynn and I first were dating, we were having getting to know each other, and we got to know each other pretty well. And then one night she's like, she does what she's like, I love you. And I wasn't expecting that. And I was like, I was scared of girls, and she was like one of the first real relationships that I ever had, because girls were just scary. Like, not so much. Yeah, exactly. Claws, everything. No. Anyway, for whatever reason, that's just what I believe. And so I didn't have any background in relationships, and following Jesus as close as I could. So it was like, oh, and I didn't know how to respond, because at that point I really hadn't thought, what in the world is love? And I didn't respond to her, oh, I love you too, which of course freaked her out a little bit. At least
I don't remember.
She told me that later on. It was like, oh, he didn't say I love you back.
Mm.
But I went home that night and I was like, Jesus, what do I do? Do I love her? And I went to the only place I knew, which was 1 Corinthians 13. And I started to think about Lynn is, can I be patient? Can I be long-suffering? And all those various phrases throughout love. And every time I thought, can I suffer along with her? I was like, yeah, I can do that. Can I not envy? Can I, and all those things, sorry. But I thought about each phrase And I was like, yes, I can do that with her. Yes, I cannot do that with her. What the case may be, is like, this is love, and this is what scripture says is love. This is what God says is love. Yeah, okay, I can do that. So it was actually my first realization of how love starts impacting life. And then, of course, a little bit later, we got married, and you get to walk that out. This is what I believe about love. And there have been times where God's rebuked me and said, I would not treat my bride the way you're treating your bride. Stop it. I was like, okay. Anyway, so love is this active thing that we have to constantly live in, just like I said, breathing in, breathing out. So then if we flip over to Galatians 5:6, the last part of verse 6 is actually all I wanted to focus on. It's like, but faith working through love. There is, when we have faith, it has to go through love. So it's, faith works by love. Without love, faith isn't happening. We can't do much of anything. And so let's go to John. Wait a minute. All right, I'm gonna jump to Mark 11:22. Told you, Andrew, I'll bounce around on you. It's like, wait, that's not the right sequence. I know.
He's used to you.
He's used to me. Yay. He's like, oh. Faith works through love. Mark 11:22. Jesus had just, the day before cursed a fig tree, and the next day it died. And the disciples were like, oh my gosh, Jesus, the tree you cursed has died. And he says in verse 22, have faith in God. For assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things that he says will be done, he will have whatsoever he says. Therefore, I say to you, whatever things you ask for when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. And the verse 25 goes on, says, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him. For your Father in heaven may also forgive your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. This is the very little bit I know about English. The word and is a connective phrase, a conjunction or whatever they call it. I'm bad at English. I got a solid D in English, just to let you know. So, but it does connect two thoughts. That much I know. So Jesus is talking about having faith, moving mountains, saying things that will change the world around us. And then he says, and whenever you're praying, forgive. Forgive those who have offended you. If we have unforgiveness in our heart, it is an indication that love is not fully engaged in our lives. It's an indication that we need to breathe more of heaven's atmosphere. We need to think like Jesus thinks. We need to be a forgiving people. And the thought of forgiveness sometimes is a very difficult thought. And I think one of the big things to remember, forgiveness does not mean trust. They are not synonymous words. We can, somebody can do something really horrendous to us, and that's probably happened to all of us if we've lived very long at all. And we forgive them, but it doesn't mean we trust them necessarily. We may trust them, but sometimes their life isn't trustworthy, but it is forgivable. So there is that distinction it's important to remember, because a lot of times we get hung up on that. And it's like, I can't forgive them. Think about what they did to me. I can't trust them ever. I was like, yeah, I get that. And Jesus doesn't command us to trust. He does command us to forgive and to love. And there's a distinction there. And I like to point that out because it can be really hard. It is really hard, actually, depending on the degree of that they've hurt you. So, but when we forgive, then our faith will engage. So going back to that Mark 11:23, our faith can engage when we forgive, because then we're acting just like God. We're acting just like the Father. We're acting just like Jesus. And that is, of course, what we definitely want to do. Let's go to John 13. Which is a perfect example of Jesus's love. I was thinking this passage is about the Last Supper of Jesus and his disciples. And I'm going to try to read verses 1 through 17. I know it's a little long, but stay with me. So now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And supper being ended, the devil already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments and took the towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? And Jesus answered and said to him, what I am doing, you do not understand, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no part in me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my head and hands. Jesus said to him, he who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but he is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him. Therefore he said, not all of you are clean. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, he sat down and said, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you this example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. A lot of teaching has come out of that passage. And there have been feet washing ceremonies, which I don't see anything wrong with that, where, you're in a church building and they get the pan of water out and some people get their feet washed, as a sign that, I'm serving you. And that's well and good. But what struck me about this passage is the end of verse 1, and it says, Jesus loved them to the end. And having known, later on says that Judas was going to betray him, it occurred to me, he washed Judas's feet, knowing that Judas was going to betray him. He washed the feet of his enemy. He forgave him before Judas had done anything. He loved him to the end. And that is a stunning thought to me anyway, that Jesus knew what Judas was going to do, and he still loved him. He still served him. He still cared for him. And Jesus says, I am your teacher and your Lord. You should do what I do. And I personally, I think that's one of the hardest things in the world, is when somebody betrays me, when I put all my trust and hope in them, and they're supposed to be somebody who, protects me, lifts me up, guides me, whatever the case may be. And they turn around, they do something that intentionally hurts me. That's a crazy place to be and a crazy place to love. Yet it is the lifestyle that Jesus has called us to. So John 13:34, Jesus said, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all of you will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And so it becomes this commandment, a step further than, the Old Testament, where it says, love as you love yourself. This one says, love as I, Jesus, have loved you, which is like crazy amount of love. But again, we're remembering the atmosphere of heaven. We're breathing that atmosphere. We're keeping our life and our lungs full of the love of heaven. And so I don't know about y'all, because I'm from Southern Illinois, y'all. For you Northerners, you guys, I don't know about you guys, but the only way I've ever been able to forgive somebody is not by going, I forgive. I forgive, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. Because every time I do that with somebody that's like really hurt me, and Lynn is like, okay, Jesus, you said to forgive, I forgive them. And then it's like a yo-yo, you throw that out and wham, it comes right back at you. I was like, but I forgave them. Why do I feel this way? I forgive them, Jesus. Wham, it comes back. I forgive them, Jesus. Comes back. It's like, what do I do? And I struggled with that for a while, with some individuals that were actually leaders in my life, and they pretty much just turned and attacked Lynn and I. And it was a deep, deep, deep wound, when you pour all your trust into somebody. And I was struggling with that. It's like, because I kept forgiving and I just couldn't forgive. I couldn't forgive. I was like, and all of a sudden I got this idea, bless them. I was like, Jesus, I can't bless them. What they did to me is just horrible. Jesus said, bless them. I was like, ah. So I started praying for these people who had used us, abused us, hurt us very, very deeply. And I started praying blessings on them. And as you after a while, you cannot hold, or at least I can't, I don't know about you guys, but I can't hold unforgiveness against somebody that I'm blessing. I mean, really praying that God, it's like, God, will you bless that person who has hurt me? And when I'm like praying God to bless them, then I am like totally releasing them into God's hands, totally, completely. And to the best of my ability, I am loving them. I'm not trusting them. Let me go back to that. I am not trusting them because I know their character. And that's God. God can make his servants stand. He can heal hearts. He can change hearts. That's God's gig. That's not ours. We are not called to be the savior of people. We're not called to force them to love, to force them to repent. We are there to love them. We are there to forgive them, and we are there to bless them. And I know this is stinking hard, depending on where a person's at in their lives. And but I tell you what, there is such incredible freedom in this. Lynn reminded me of a parable this morning where Jesus was talking, and I don't know where it's at, Andrew, sorry. But Jesus is talking in his parable, and he talks about this servant who owed his master something like millions and millions of dollars in today's terms, and he couldn't pay it. And the master was like, I'm gonna sell you and your family and your goods so you can pay off all this debt, and I'm gonna throw you in jail. And he falls at the master's feet and says, I'll pay you back, be patient with me. And the master has compassion. He has love. And he forgives him. Well, then that servant goes out, finds somebody that owes him like a couple $1,000s, and, starts to choke him like, pay me, pay me, pay me. And that fellow servant falls on his knees and goes, be patient with me, I'll pay you back. And he's like, I will not. And he throws him in jail. And then the master hears about his servant's unforgiveness, and he calls him in. And he says, I forgave you all those millions of dollars, and you wouldn't forgive a few thousand. You're going to jail. The crazy thing about that is our unforgiveness, our lack of love for someone can bind us up more than it binds them up. Crazy it may seem, somebody may do something horrible to us and they have like zero consciousness of it. They're like totally fine, and we're stewing in this unforgiveness, and it just bubbles up and bubbles up and bubbles up, and it's just obsesses us. We can't sleep at night, we can't function during the day, and they're just going along, la 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 la. They're living their life, they're having a good old time, and we're sitting in a whole lot of mess, and we're in jail, actually. If you think about it, we've imprisoned ourselves in our unforgiveness. And that is not the life Jesus wants for us. He wants us to live free and happy. And by simply forgiving that person, by blessing that person, it opens the jail cell so we can walk out. So I think this is a wonderful thing that God has graced us with the ability to forgive. It's come into my presence, says Jesus. Come into my presence with joy. Live freely. Live lightly. Romans something in the Message, isn't it? You like that passage. So I was just like, choose to live freely, lightly. At least those words triggered something in my brain. And that's what God has invited us to. And that's what we can run into all the time, constantly. And it's amazing. It's a great thing. And it's our privilege. It's our opportunity to live in love, to live our life in love. Jesus says, I am your peace. We had a teacher years ago that, Kenneth Hagin, he said he went to heaven. And he said when he got to heaven, there was this, almost like this cloud kind of thing. But the cloud itself was peace. He said, heaven is so thick with peace. He said, you could like cut it with a knife. It is just this amazing, wonderful place full of love and peace. So Jesus blesses us with peace. And if you're ever needing to fill yourself up in that, just go to the first part of almost every epistle. throughout the Bible. And it starts out grace and peace from God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. Over and over again, grace and peace from God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. I really don't think it's like, howdy, kind of, it's like, good morning, it's not the way, it's like, how are you doing, kind of introduction to a letter. It is literally God saying grace and peace to you. And that's amazing. Constantly, over and over and over and over again, we breathe it in, we breathe it out, we breathe it in, we breathe it out. And so that's our joy, our privilege, our responsibility to love. And it is free. And it's light. Did you find that? No. Okay, never mind. That's okay. Live lightly, live freely. That's my encouragement. So that is what I had to say today. That's, so I was thinking this morning, I was like, what in the world questions do you put with that kind of message? Because it can be really like, tell me the last time when you had to forgive somebody, tell me what your heart's like. It's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. That's like, those are deep meditation kind of thoughts, and like sozo sessions. Those are sozo sessions, right? So that wasn't a question. It was like, so I actually had a question, but I don't think I wrote it down. Let me see. Oh, I did. Good for me. Yay, I'm amazing. Share a story of how loving forgiveness changed your life or the life of someone you know. So you can actually go into breakout rooms and share something about somebody else that didn't have anything to do with you. Hey, I have a friend who forgave this friend, and this is what happened. Or you can share with each other a time where you did forgive somebody, kind of like I was sharing with that leader who hurt Lynn and I really, really bad. And by blessing them, we received freedom, lightness. So anyway, it'll be fun. I thought it would be fun when we come back together. We can share stories like, oh, I walked through this, and this is the victory I had. You don't have to share, oh, I'm walking through this now and I am like so bound up. Unless you want prayer, then of course that's good. So Andrew, I have no idea how to write that down, but it was like, share a story, how loving forgiveness changed your life or the life of somebody you know. Shall I repeat that? Share a story of how loving forgiveness changed your life or the life of someone you know.
All right, we got it. Andrew, got it. Everybody else. All right, I'm going to send y'all out to breakout rooms. I do think I want to emphasize this because I feel like it's the topic of the hour. I really think that God right now is really wanting to reveal that aspect of himself on a greater level. God's been just showing me the multifacetedness of love. And the question, if you get done with this question, the question that's been blowing my mind for the last several weeks in a row is, okay, so God is love. Jesus is a representation of the Father in the earth. And so we can conclude that every single thing that Jesus said and did was an expression of love. Now, what does that show you about love? To me, it blows my mind, So
Yeah.
Go ahead and talk about that if you get done with your stories. But I know when we have a lot of pastoral people in here, we might have a lot of stories. So I'll send you out now and we'll see you back in a little bit. Love you guys.
See you soon.